The XLVeri were not a species that feared the unknown. For centuries, they had traveled the stars, conquering and expanding their empire. They had seen countless alien races, most of them weak and primitive, barely worth the effort of assimilation. Those who resisted were crushed. Those who surrendered were enslaved. It had always been that way. It would always be that way. When their fleet arrived in the Solus III system, they expected another easy conquest. Their scouts had reported a single human colony on the third planet. The inhabitants were a young race, still new to space travel. Their technology was crude compared to the XLVeri's advanced warships. The admiral of the fleet, Vosrak, had already begun planning the invasion. He did not expect a battle. He expected a massacre. But then they saw the warship. It was alone, floating in the void, positioned between the XLVeri fleet and the planet below. It was smaller than their dreadnoughts, but larger than a standard cruiser. Its dark gray hull was lined with strange markings, symbols that meant nothing to the XLVeri. It did not flee. It did not send a message. It just waited. Vosrak narrowed his eyes. "Scan the vessel," he ordered. His crew obeyed, sending waves of energy to probe the alien ship. The results were unexpected. The human warship's shields were unusually strong, far more powerful than its size suggested. Its hull was reinforced with unknown alloys, resistant to standard plasma weapons. And then there were the weapons, rows upon rows of missile launchers, railguns, and energy turrets. Vosrak frowned. "One warship dares to stand against us." He laughed. "They must be more foolish than I thought. Target the vessel. Destroy it." The fleet adjusted its formation, dozens of warships locking onto the lone human vessel, their weapons charged, glowing with energy. The human ship still did not move. Then, just as the XLVeri prepared to fire, the warship came to life. Without warning, it surged forward with terrifying speed, its engines burning bright against the darkness of space. The first volley came faster than the XLVeri could react. A series of projectiles shrieked toward them, too fast for their sensors to track. The first XLVeri cruiser took a direct hit. Its shields flared, then collapsed. An explosion tore through its hull, ripping the vessel apart in seconds. Panic spread through the fleet. The human warship moved like a ghost, slipping between their formations, striking without mercy. Its railguns punched through their defenses as if they were paper. Its missiles curved and twisted, dodging countermeasures, slamming into vital systems with deadly precision. Vosrak's confidence turned to shock. "Impossible," he roared. "How can a single ship do this?" No one had an answer. Another XLVeri ship exploded, then another. The human warship danced through the wreckage, never stopping, never slowing. It was not just a warship. It was a predator, and it was hunting them. For the first time in his life, Vosrak felt something unfamiliar creeping into his mind. Fear. And the battle had only just begun. The battlefield was chaos. The once mighty XLVeri fleet, which had arrived in the Solus III system with overwhelming confidence, was now in disarray. Ships twisted and turned, trying to escape the relentless assault of the lone human warship. Fires raged across broken hulls, escape pods ejected into the void, and officers screamed orders that no one could follow. The human vessel moved with unnatural precision, weaving through the destruction like it had already seen every possible outcome of the battle. Its weapons never stopped. Railgun rounds punched through XLVeri armor like it was made of glass. Missiles twisted and accelerated at impossible angles, striking weak points that no ordinary sensors should have detected. Energy beams carved through entire sections of warships, leaving nothing but floating debris. It was not just fighting. It was dismantling the fleet, ship by ship, with terrifying efficiency. Admiral Vosrak gritted his teeth as another cruiser exploded on the view screen, its wreckage slamming into a nearby destroyer. This was not how it was supposed to go. The XLVeri were conquerors, feared across the stars. They had crushed a dozen civilizations before this, some far older than humanity. And yet, here they were, being torn apart by a single warship. "Form up. Regroup," he barked, trying to salvage the situation. His remaining ships obeyed, pulling back into a defensive formation, their weapons locked onto the human vessel. A direct, concentrated barrage might be enough to overwhelm its shields. The moment they were in position, the order was given. Dozens of plasma cannons, torpedo launchers, and energy turrets fired at once. The darkness of space lit up as the combined firepower of the HFY fleet streaked toward the lone warship. For a brief second, Vosrak allowed himself to believe they had won. And then, the human ship disappeared. The Admiral's breath caught in his throat. It hadn't been destroyed. It hadn't been hit. It had moved. Faster than anything in their records, it had activated its thrusters and repositioned itself above them in an instant. Before the HFY could adjust, the counterattack began. The warship released a wave of kinetic rounds, each traveling at incredible speeds, tearing through hulls and ripping apart engines. A nearby battleship took a direct hit, its power core rupturing in a silent explosion that sent debris flying in all directions. A destroyer tried to break away, only to be struck by a missile that sent it spiraling into the wreckage of its fallen allies. The HFY were not just losing. They were being hunted. Every attempt to escape was met with deadly precision. Every strategy crumbled before it could be executed. It was as if the human warship knew their every move before they even made it. Vosrak's hands tightened into fists. This was no ordinary enemy. It was not simply advanced technology or superior firepower that was tearing through his fleet. No, there was something more, something terrifying. The humans were not just another species to be conquered. They were something else entirely. And in that moment, as his flagship's alarms blared and his crew scrambled in panic, he realized the truth. The HFY had made a grave mistake. They had thought they were the hunters. But tonight, they had become the prey. Panic spread like wildfire through the remaining HFY ships. What had started as an easy conquest had turned into a nightmare beyond their worst fears. The lone human warship had already torn through nearly half of their fleet, and it showed no signs of stopping. Every attempt to predict its movements failed. Every counterattack crumbled before it could even be executed. It was as if the ship was alive, an unstoppable force that had only one purpose: destruction. Admiral Vosrak's mind raced for answers, but there were none. The HFY had never faced anything like this before. Their enemies in the past had been predictable, their technology inferior, their tactics crude. But this human warship fought like a ghost, appearing and disappearing at will, striking with terrifying accuracy before vanishing again. The HFY's advanced targeting systems struggled to keep up, their sensors unable to track its rapid movements. Their weapons, once the pride of their empire, now seemed useless against an enemy that refused to be hit. Another explosion rocked the fleet as one of their last remaining battleships was torn apart by a barrage of railgun fire. The kinetic rounds punched through the ship's armored hull like it was nothing, ripping through decks and igniting fuel reserves in a chain reaction of destruction. The screams of the dying filled the communication channels, a chilling reminder that they were running out of time. Vosrak's heart pounded as he watched the chaos unfold. This wasn't just a defeat, it was annihilation. His fleet, the pride of the HFY Empire, was being dismantled piece by a single enemy. How was this possible? How could one human warship be more dangerous than an entire armada? He clenched his fists, his claws digging into his palms as he forced himself to think. He needed a plan. He needed a way out. But even as he searched for an answer, he knew the truth deep down. There was no escape. The human warship was methodical, relentless, unstoppable. Every ship that tried to retreat was hunted down and destroyed. The humans were not allowing survivors. They were sending a message. The HFY had come expecting an easy conquest, a simple extermination of an inferior race. Instead, they had encountered something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The humans were not weak. They were not prey. They were predators, monsters in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to strike. And now, as the last remnants of his fleet burned around him, Admiral Vosrak finally understood. The XL had made a fatal mistake in underestimating humanity, and now they would pay the price in blood. His flagship's alarm screamed as the human warship turned its attention toward him. A single message flickered onto his screen, sent from the enemy vessel. It was brief, simple, and terrifying. Run. But there was nowhere left to run. The message burned into Admiral Vosrak's mind like a curse. Run. A single word, cold and final, sent from the human warship as if it were toying with him. But there was no escape, no mercy, no salvation. His once mighty fleet had been reduced to scattered wreckage, floating lifelessly in the void. Fires flickered in the darkness, the remains of proud warships that had ruled the stars now nothing more than debris. His crew scrambled in panic, desperately trying to bring the flagship's failing systems back online. Shields were barely holding, weapons flickered with unstable energy, and the engines groaned under the stress of emergency maneuvers. The human warship had not fired yet, but Vosrak knew it was only a matter of time. It was watching, waiting for him to make a move. It wanted him to understand, to feel the helplessness that every species the XL had conquered must have felt before they were wiped from existence. He gritted his teeth, his mind racing. There had to be something he could do, some way to turn the tide. But what strategy could work against something that had already countered everything he had tried? The human warship had defied logic. It had fought like a demon, relentless and precise, striking as if it could see into the future. Every attempt to outmaneuver it had failed. Every shot fired at it had either missed or been shrugged off like it was nothing. It was not just a warship. It was a force of nature, an executioner sent to punish those who dared to challenge its kind. His claws trembled as he gripped the control panel. He had always believed the XL were the apex predators of the galaxy, but tonight, staring at the cold void filled with the burning remains of his armada, he realized the truth. Humanity was something far worse, a new kind of monster, one that did not conquer for glory or expansion, but for survival. They did not fight wars for pride. They fought to ensure no enemy could ever threaten them again. And when they fought, they did not just win. They destroyed. His thoughts were shattered as the human warship finally moved. It surged forward, closing the distance between them in an instant. For a moment, there was silence, the kind that came before a storm. Then the attack began. A barrage of kinetic rounds slammed into his ship, breaking through the last of the shields with terrifying ease. The impact sent shockwaves through the hull, tearing apart decks, rupturing power cores, and igniting chain explosions that ripped through the flagship's structure. Sparks rained down from shattered panels, consoles exploded, and the screams of his crew filled the bridge. Vosrak struggled to stand, his body aching from the force of the attack. The flagship was dying. He could feel it in the way the artificial gravity flickered, the way the lights dimmed as the last reserves of energy drained away. Smoke filled the air, the acrid scent of burning metal stinging his senses. The human warship had fired only a single salvo, yet it had been enough to cripple the last vessel of the XL fleet. This was it, the end of everything he had known. He stumbled toward the communication console, his vision swimming. If he was to die, he needed to know. He needed to see the face of the enemy who had destroyed him. With the last of his strength, he activated the visual link. The screen flickered, static washing over it for a moment before stabilizing. And then he saw them. A human. A single figure, seated in a command chair, staring back at him with cold, calculating eyes. There was no arrogance in that gaze, no hatred, no satisfaction, only quiet determination. The human leaned forward slightly, as if considering something. Then, in a calm, steady voice, they spoke. This was a warning. There won't be another. And with that, the screen went dark. A final explosion rocked the flagship as the last of its power cores detonated. As the fire consumed everything, Admiral Vosrak had only one final thought before the void swallowed him whole. The Excelveri had never stood a chance. The remains of the Excelveri fleet drifted silently through the void, broken and lifeless. What had once been a powerful armada, feared across the galaxy, was now nothing more than wreckage scattered across the endless black. Twisted metal, shattered hulls, and the frozen corpses of fallen warriors floated aimlessly, a grim reminder of the battle that had taken place. The human warship remained at the center of it all, its hull barely scratched, its weapons still armed, ready to fire again if necessary. But there was no need. There were no enemies left. The battle was over, and the victor had been decided long before the first shot was even fired. On board the human warship, Captain Elias Kane sat in his command chair, watching the aftermath unfold on the main screen. His expression was unreadable, his fingers resting against his chin as if deep in thought. The bridge was quiet, the tension from the battle slowly fading into an eerie stillness. His crew waited, their eyes locked on their captain, expecting an order, a command, something to break the silence. But Kane said nothing for a long moment. His gaze remained fixed on the wreckage outside, watching as pieces of the enemy fleet slowly drifted apart. Finally, he let out a slow breath and leaned back in his seat. "Status report," he said, his voice calm despite the destruction they had just unleashed. "All systems green," one of the officers replied. "Shields are holding. Minimal damage sustained. Ammunition levels at 73%. No casualties. No casualties." Against an entire fleet, Kane nodded slowly. It was exactly as he had expected. Humanity had long since stopped fighting fair. They couldn't afford to. The galaxy was a dangerous place, filled with empires that saw them as nothing more than another species to be conquered, another world to be subjugated. But humanity had learned from history. They had seen what happened to civilizations that hesitated, to those who placed diplomacy above survival. The Excelveri had made the same mistake so many others had before them. They had assumed humanity was weak. That assumption had cost them everything. Kane's eyes narrowed as he tapped a command into his console, sending a signal back to Earth. The battle report would be received within minutes, and the response would be swift. The High Command would know what had happened here, and preparations would be made. The Excelveri would not be the last to challenge humanity, but they would serve as a warning to those who came after. There would be no more underestimation, no more dismissing humanity as a minor species. They had proven their strength today, as they had done many times before. And they would do it again, as many times as necessary. Kane turned to his crew, his expression hardening. "Begin salvage operations. Recover anything useful. Then set course for the next patrol sector." The officers nodded and got to work, their movements efficient, practiced. There was no celebration, no cheering for their victory. They did not fight for glory. They fought to survive. And in this galaxy, survival meant never showing weakness. Kane glanced once more at the wreckage outside before turning away, his voice calm as he gave the final order. "If anyone else out there is watching, let them see what happens when they cross us." The engines of the human warship roared to life, and with a final, silent farewell to the battlefield, it vanished into the void, leaving only destruction in its wake. Far beyond the battlefield, in the depths of uncharted space, the news of the Excelveri fleet's destruction spread like wildfire. Across countless star systems, eyes turned toward humanity with a mixture of fear and disbelief. The Excelveri had been one of the most dominant warlords in the galaxy, an empire that had crushed civilizations without mercy, their fleets unstoppable. Until now, the impossible had happened. A single human warship had torn through their armada as if they were nothing more than drifting scrap. The implications sent a ripple of dread through the ruling factions of the galaxy. The Council of Dominion, an alliance of the most powerful species, convened in an emergency session, their holographic forms flickering as they debated in hushed, urgent tones. "It cannot be true," one of them muttered, his scaled hands trembling. The HFY were warriors, conquerors. They should have obliterated the humans with ease. Another, a creature with luminescent eyes and an exoskeletal body, hissed in frustration. And yet, they did not. Not a single HFY ship survived. Their admiral did not even manage to send a full distress signal before it was over. This is a disaster. The third figure, older and wiser, spoke with a voice heavy with realization. "We have miscalculated. Humanity is not what we believe them to be. They do not fight like us. They do not think like us. And they do not lose." The chamber fell into an uneasy silence. For centuries, the dominant empires of the galaxy had viewed humanity as little more than an ambitious but fragile species, unworthy of serious attention. Their technology had been advancing rapidly, but compared to the ancient war fleets of the great powers, they were still considered insignificant. That belief had been shattered. The destruction of the HFY fleet was not just a military defeat, it was a statement. Humanity had drawn a line in the stars, and they had done so with blood and fire. The council members knew what this meant. The balance of power had shifted, and if humanity had such weapons, such tactics, then it was no longer a question of if they would rise, but when. The empires had two choices: confront humanity now, before they grew even stronger, or try to appease them and hope for coexistence. But in the depths of their hearts, each leader knew the truth. The HFY had likely believed they could negotiate when the war turned against them. They had been given a warning instead. No second chances, no mercy. A cold chill settled over the chamber. Somewhere out there, beyond their borders, humanity was watching, calculating, preparing. And if they were pushed, if they were forced into another war, the galaxy now knew exactly what would happen. The meeting ended without resolution, and one by one, the holograms flickered out, leaving only darkness behind. In the vast emptiness of space, the stars burned on, unaware of the fear they now held in the hearts of those who had once ruled the cosmos. Humanity was no longer just another species in the great galactic game. They were something far more dangerous, a force that could not be stopped, a storm that had only just begun. In the cold silence of deep space, far from the wreckage of the HFY fleet and the hushed panic of the galactic powers, the human warship slipped through the void, unseen and unheard. Its mission was complete, its warning delivered, but its purpose had only just begun. Captain Elias Kane sat in the dim glow of his command deck, his eyes fixed on the endless horizon of stars stretching before him. The weight of what had happened still hung in the air, unspoken but understood by every crew member on board. They had done what needed to be done. The HFY had come to conquer, to burn their colonies and enslave their people, just as they had done to countless other species before. But they had miscalculated. They had not faced a race that would surrender. They had faced humanity. And humanity did not lose. Kane leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping idly against the armrest as he listened to the quiet hum of the ship's systems. The reports had already been sent back to Earth. The High Command would analyze the battle, the tactics, the enemy's mistakes. Adjustments would be made, preparations set in motion. There would be more battles in the future. There always were. The HFY were only the beginning. Somewhere, in the vast reaches of space, other empires were watching, weighing their options, deciding if humanity was worth the risk. Some would choose diplomacy, realizing that peace was the only logical path forward. But others, blinded by arrogance or desperation, would make the same mistake the HFY had. They would come with their fleets, their weapons, their false belief that they could break humanity. And they would learn the same lesson. Kane exhaled slowly, his gaze drifting to the stars. For all the power humanity now wielded, for all the fear they had instilled, they did not seek war. War had been forced upon them, again and again, by those who believed they could take without consequence. The truth was simple. Humanity had never wanted to be monsters, but in a galaxy that respected only strength, they had become exactly what was necessary to survive. And if the galaxy demanded monsters, then monsters they would be. The warship's engines flared, propelling it forward into the unknown. Somewhere out there, in the darkness, the next challenge waited. Kane and his crew would be ready. Because in the unforgiving vastness of space, there was one truth that every empire would come to understand. Humanity did not forgive. Humanity did not forget. And humanity would never fall.